Dear Americans and Chinese, I recorded how the One China policy and how the Constitution unabridged and hypernated pure, how that stayed sabotaged by a human fact human nature breaching method that was entrenched at countries A through Z before they were countries and while they were becoming countries, entertaining what can't be entertained, and the value simultaneously slash hyper simultaneously of the One China policy and the Constitution unabridged. And why hypernated pure? Because we are a human species body of individual bodies with all group differences being generated by the identity of that of hyper simultaneous that is demonstrating to us. For example, we have black pupils, whites of eyes, same color eyes, same exact time, and we have the exceptions part where some people, the exceptions. And other species bodies, birds, fish, even have two eyes. Quality aspects in nature distinct from ourselves, but simultaneously non-distinct, like two eyes. Consciousness. And simultaneously they are with ourselves, but for a further hyper simultaneous, because neither they nor our species invented this. These the quality aspects in nature, aspects plural, we only have an extent of the identity of all space slash existence to discern. But where we have that with each subject, its complete identity of relationship to itself is inseparable from that and the value of that. But this also comes with Earth's a special difference. But see, we have not been appreciating this because we have entertained with things that our founders had to communicate to us through cipher about a breaching method. And we have entertained, have only known entertained things that a human fact human nature breaching method caused. It caused also, it, main, it measured and maintained people blaming other things, others, ourselves, when nature demonstrated that, as nature does. In other words, nature demonstrates to us that American history books are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, rock collusion slash s with the breaching method. America's founders wanted us to understand that, to discern. We wanted us to self value that. Even though it's a negative, self value is a positive means to discern it, tell on it. See, the people in the law, they have been collusions with all kinds of natures of organized crime and methods of them as predicate acts with facts methods, because that's all they were known. That difference. See, where nature itself is showing us the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time with the other color part, the exceptions part. But white and black are same color eyes, yin yang. See, in other words, the sciences, once they become entertained from off the sciences, campuses, locations, they were forced to collusions to an extent we could discern that. In other words, collusions. So then further evil from there, because that was only allowed. The suburbs were designed before America's founders were born, and slavery was entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies. And there were laws against anyone, if they were even found out to have heard someone speaking about building infrastructure outside of internationally monitored conversations, they sought that person out, tortured, killed them, everyone next to them. So everyone was fact human nature enslaved. So everyone was physically enslaved. And the nature would continue to demonstrate this. And this, so everyone, this measured and maintained self-valued roles, blaming other things, others themselves, like when defending their notions of integrity. Oh, but I'm a scientist. When did the science speak for the Constitution unabridged? At countries A through Z, the equivalent. To maintain a one-child policy, one way to have one-child policy is have it correlate slash hypercorrelate with what is true always, with nature's identity itself teaches us. It will show us answers and I'll donate pantheism / hyper pantheism through America and China and Russia and India and Europe as if it was a country to the rest of the world, and Africa. And then we're going to deal with individual finite, group difference / S, and species difference. Because not just with the color of our eyes, we are being shown its hyper difference is inseparable from all things. And where there are exceptions, that's why we have to value a special difference. Earth, its identity is equally relativity, as every identity has relativity, positive and negative simultaneously, where and how more and more forever nature is being made as that which will only stay positive unto itself. But in other words, it could be, in other words, otherwise it's forced from here. We could be systems tactical ulterior than its own and still have roles with that. But it will demonstrate with forced space nature transfer, which is more probably how the ancients appreciated the name or the phrase or the scientific value, Leth of Hades, Leth, Lethe, of Hades. See, but the semi-ancients became incapable of defending themselves and of affording their future generations what is now, like the republic for which we stand, is still abridged. It is criminally / hyper-criminally foreign influenced. This breaching method needs names A through Z to blame names A through Z. It got that force, tricked, hurt, persuaded, made only capable. And it sustained that. And then modern ages were founded. While the methods sustaining that and rolls with it didn't even realize what was being sustained, what was being propagated, self-cultivated. So we have suburbs. It's not even debatable. They're only capable of causing negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and being reliant upon means to feed them. People to feed themselves. Have water through systems tactical ulterior from the one that is positive unto its identity and not as criminal insidious per nature itself. Nature itself will demonstrate the laws that were entrenched in America before America was America. The laws that were entrenched when they have, in other words, this shows how it uses remotely the identities of integrity. In other words, for example, they got the names of the people of the sciences. They're recorded incapable of defending how they've been trained to speak about. And the difference between them, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and news roles too, planting evidences with the interbrand switching and forging names at the same time with a whole bunch of different countries. So everyone's a chaos, pretending they could speak for difference when all stands abridged to A through Z. In other words, it's not. They have this right through our schools, used to measure and maintain self-valued roles with it. See, no one even realized that because they were and are used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusional, especially it's constant. It's use of location / S that has to be observed to be able to observe how to overcome the illness throughout the species body since some ancient times. The suburbs and the suits and ties, counters and exceptions, even those differences use tactile because it's hyper difference / differences are what we are observing. In other words, with conjunction to ourselves, in other words, it's one identity of hyper relativity is showing us that all the species, individual bodies, have a whole bunch of individuals, of totally different species. It's how it's communicating with us. It's how from as us too. To an extent, we are it. That which is everything Even if something is made up, its identity of hypervolume science that no one could mimic is inseparable from the parts of that thing made up, individual, grouped, and together the same way. No, we could observe this. This is exactly why and how species bodies of individual bodies are manifest this way. Anyway, in other words, so it is its hyper difference, the difference of its identity, hyper invisible but still discernible. It is why and how we need more than one word for a verb to appreciate it. It's not, in other words, we are also being shown how it's a actual identity, hyper invisible, but still, like the verbs, the parts of speech are about the invisible, but still discernible. But why, for example, we need those more than one word for a verb? We have a verb is one word. A predicate is another type of verb as a main verb. A participle nature. There's present participle, past participle. I'm referring to it as a nature because we only have an extent of the complete identity of all space/existence with every subject any subject we could grapple with individually, or understand individually, grouped, and to the extent we could understand simultaneously. Its volume science is this way: a trinity because it is grouped 5 ways distinctly from how it is grouped 3 ways. And the value of that comes with a differential relativity/hyperrelativity demonstration /S to us. In other words, so I'll donate pantheism/hyperpantheism as a method/S. And the whole world will understand what you guys are speaking about when you say, because science shows the suburbs, let alone the cities. The suburbs were designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, tactically denature ground, earth, and waters. And two, by the way, when I was a kid, you could just put shovels in and lift it up, and they're worms. You could find worms. In other words. And now you can't, like hardly ever you see a worm. Like they're almost completely gone. And no, in the rain, in other words, when there are no longer bugs on the surface of the water, there's all raindrops. But when it rains, worms come from the earth, and they walk into the bodies of water. They were not just puddles. They're not even present in the puddles anymore. I saw barely any, and I had to put things under the ground for years, and I still just starting to a little bit, maybe a little effective. But we have to do it as a species body to heal the tactically denatured, and in other words, not legitimate debate. It gets away with pretending it's debatable that the suburbs are tactically denatured, let alone the cities. This breaching method knew. So it was measuring and maintaining people that are going to be a certain type of victim/hyper victim. And they're going to ignore the breaching method, that nature itself, and that our founders, if we pay attention to them properly, they communicated to us. Communication is simultaneously greater than and more finite than what is said. This breaching method measures and maintains. The experts on American sciences that they self-value are the words of our founders used to get over on them, leaving out self-value, leaving out what they declassified about those words, about the standing, torture, extortion, slavery, and sensing method. It was a method of everyone sensing each other. Everyone sensing each other for the breaching method, for the hyper-foreign, not just for the foreign. We know that was true too. It's relative too to where and how they blame other things other than themselves. No, but oh, but Europe, there are allies, this, that. In other words, there is no ally unless it's for the human species body of individual bodies. Appreciation system. In other words, Connecticut has interbranch names that forge names and switch names. Americans, people of China. There are all the countries A through Z in the news involved with them, leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and sense. So the interbranch switch and forge names. They are increasingly planting fake transcripts and fake evidences as collusion slash S with all kinds of distinct natures of crime scenes and relative body dumping spots and timed use slash S of that. Regardless, there wasn't the killers involved, including the killer's involvements, though, in the body dumping spot of one of the killers, as reported, and how there were more than one body dumping spots reported, is also evidential. It has something to do with people on the state judicial branch offices of Connecticut, Weathersfield, Connecticut, and its roles with the state corrections offices and names next to it through time, which is on the town line of Hartford and Weathersfield. A whole bunch of people tied to a Fred Grouzet have roles with judges, family members, and people from and various police departments, also with medical and sexual offenders of kids with overt criminal enterprises, and with sequence ships, identity theft, fraud, slanders were involved. So that's why, in other words, interstates. There are proofs that a Fred Grisey might have roles with the World Trade. In other words, definitely people associate him with the World Trade Center attack involved, and the FBI director Robert Luskin and his co-defendants, and they have roles with increasingly with predicate acts from off campuses, planting faked and changed and hiding information that they should not have hid when I was a kid, like what I recorded tied to the a health class I had associated with Fred Grisey. These are also people with security of the schools who have roles with all kinds of different natures of organized crimes and changing and faking the substance of everything, and evidence also having this done for them. A whole bunch of different countries and have roles with differences rackets where they had the audacity, as the breaching method knew they would, as a certain type of victim slash hyper victim, they're going to speak about the law anyway, leaving out what really they were and are capable of discerning with that. Otherwise keeping other things others ourselves blame for why and how everyone's guilty with that together, or sensing for the breaching method, for the hyperforeign. In other words, nature itself wants and needs us to be simultaneously valuing ourselves independent as an independent body and unified as a human species body per its system law. The one that has the other species bodies. Distinct, non-distinct, simultaneous, slash hyper simultaneous. Slash part, it is functional how it is not only hyper invisible but still discernible, distinctly from invisible but still discernible. For example, parts of speech has 5 parts of itself, has grouped 5 ways, distinctly from how it is grouped 3 ways. And the value of that has differential relativity and demonstration of what we are observing is the same identity that has, in other words, it's the 3 parts of time grouped. There's an extent to the past that we know is true always. There's an extent right now that we know is true always active. There's an extent as value. In other words, as its value, where it is as everything but not by any way. In other words, and there's an extent like the season's value. We know about that here now because we are being communicated to. But see, but these communications, it measures and maintains use slash S of that being now through systems tactical ulterior from its own, the only one that could hold us to value properly the one China policy or the Constitution unabridged as a policy. So America's founders, behind James Madison, his plan. Then they went and got George Washington to agree to use that plan to counter, extort, and force all the other founders by using those threats against them on everyone, by making them break the rules. So in other words, the rules have been abridged since semi-ancient time, tactically abridged, tactically / hyper-tactically. Because even those truths, this is because of that, and this person, that, even those truths are used to hide behind by the breaching method that has nature itself demonstrating to us its relativity with other people's motivations and narratives regarding their motivations. For example, with their roles, when use /s of their own name /s or of others. And when I say their own name, that also means humanity. This breaching method knew that anyone, any grouping, no matter how powerful a leader could get, or any grouping of humanity could get, as long as it has complete possession over all locations, areas, and states in ways that no one could fathom, they won't be able to make the humanity, they won't be able to make anything but collusions when speaking about the law. As styles, too, forced by nature itself. To get the Constitution unabridged, we must appreciate yin yang and alpha and omega together. Were more probably used to teach about what is variable and constant, rather than Boolean logic. No, which they invented that description of it around around the time of the Civil War. We know that the databases are still databases since before computers. They were maintained collusion /s with that use of location /s that nobody wanted collusion /s with. And I'm saying it that way because it's a singular breaching method that we could discern. That was sustained against countries and names and differences A through Z. Male, female. You think a female in New York City in one of those big people stacking buildings that look just like the veterans buildings? No. Nature showing us to appreciate water, not through systems that have people stacked upon in New York City, not through systems that pretend things that are debatable that are not. That increasingly you need to attach people to fake and change communications. So in other words, everyone's still jumping other people's conversations where they're not supposed to be, including the courts too. Because they were used remotely, all sides of criminal and civil cases in the courts at the same time, and the difference between them and the intelligence tied to them. This difference is rack. There's some black KKK themed involved, Confederate flag team involved with black and white female judges within the British Superior Court and their Facebook pages, page /s. / pages, because then they started making more and more of them. But they were trying to make it look like they didn't realize they were screening their actual motivations, because that was after the World Trade Center attack. The British Superior Court had roles with child defenders before the World Trade Center attack, even ones involved with the Department of Children and Families. That's why they're separating kids from families. And the difference between that, or why they have to do with that, and the family's back. In other words, the difference is racket too. There are problems because between the campuses too. I recorded a predicate acts method /s and rolls with it. Nature itself, we're going to observe, has been demonstrating to us individually grouped in together. There has been a hyper foreign involved, not just foreign. In other words, foreign Again, we're supposed to be simultaneously unified and independent. And A through Z have impositions upon this, having all natures of unity and all natures of independence have been through and stayed abridged systems and styles and natures of logic that can't defend that without self-evaluating things like wars, for example. In other words, you guys blamed what even caused the Civil War on other things other than ourselves. Exactly the way the breaching method wanted and need you to, Americans. You're going to speak about other countries' histories. You guys use the knowledge of good and evil to get over on what was recorded first and what's principle. You make things simple, tactile from how they're simple. You make things complicated, tactile from how they're complicated. Nature shows this. In other words, there are a whole bunch of Muslims who want and Christians and Catholics, people of other religions who know, in other words. And we had obligations to teach. These people are reading these books sequentially out of sequence, making things that appear, making, in other words, truths used for lies. Like, for example, people have the right to have religion, but they don't have a right to pretend that others are hateful because their interpretation of the religion is goes by what the book says. Only defend right here. Doesn't say defend the other part. Doesn't say you even have to read the part. It says all you have to do is defend right here in the part that comes before it. So you guys make things that, in other words, same thing with the Quran, and same thing with women shouldn't have to wear a headdress if they don't want to wear it. That's because the Quran says all that matters is if they're honest about the use of the name of the identity of the hyper simultaneous, because it is more than one value, and it is not again. It is not identity. It is not our identity. It is not the identity of the other species' bodies that invented those quality aspects in nature that we have non-distinctly, and or that which we have distinctly. All exceptions, exception nature, come with demonstration /s of the same thing. And again, of how we only have an extent of its complete identity that we could discern with every subject, individual, group together. But are we even with that extent of it that we could discern, or what is true always? Like how those three parts of time are bound, value. In other words, it comes with its complete identity in relationship to itself. Excuse me. And it comes with only increasing value with that. Vaccines, I teach those things, belong. So I was in the Ninth Circuit Court as an observer next to the World Trade Center the day right before the attack in Manhattan. Names on both sides of that case and their sources. And the court itself has rules with sequence shifts and predicate acts with names next to the location that day too, and which is one of the locations next to the World Trade Center attack, the Ninth Circuit Court. And in other words, WFSB also had collusion /S with those names. A whole bunch of people tied to the name Scalora have roles of the World Trade Center attack. A number of her boyfriends and of a cousin she named Joe DeMorrow, she was reportedly intimately involved with from Wethersfield, who has a brother, John DeMorrow, too, who is involved with old Wethersfield locations and names that next to the Board of Education, the corrections judicial officers, but also the Department of Motor Vehicles, Department of Transportation, campuses where there are database identities of relativity to us. These locations have been used through a whole bunch of hyper additional apparent motivation relative, but there's also the breaching method. It has a method singular that effectively kept and keeps other things, others ourselves, blamed for things our founders ourselves and nature itself demonstrates the blame on the human fact-driven nature. The human fact-driven nature breaching method is one of the things true always that slavery was about. And it was before America's founders were born. And our founders communicated for us to understand how everyone was measuring and maintaining themselves, not to get in trouble by the breaching of the so collusions with it. Otherwise, they were sensing for it, and in ways they couldn't even fathom. To an extent they didn't fathom. Because in other words, and this is also what witch trials are about, regardless if they were completely made up, who made them up, whatever. They're about that breaching method entrenched. And so I don't know who watched in the past the Kung Fu Theater. Criminal insidiousness is the nature of theater. And it was unleashed everywhere the species body has a name, at all locations, areas, and states. Per method, we'll examine vaccines like just things. Merry Christmas. And that's about, in other words, make it greater than that. Mary, mother's energy rises/raises. Rising, why? Some words that end with a why, ask a question. Anthony, alpha neutrality/neutralize. Telling highs. Omega neutrality/neutralizing. Why? Vaccines. I teach you things, we have to follow mandated law. You have to stop sensing for the people that I call collusions. In other words, they're fishing for what I say, than what others say too. They're when they speak about what they think, oh, the FBI is guilty or innocent or credible, or when they say the CIA is guilty or credible, the difference between that two is their roles with screening remote uses of all natures of difference, like those differences, those agencies. There's a Kelly Kaczmarek who's involved with, even if she made that up, or in other words, about the CIA on Facebook. Only reason I know how to pronounce her name is because of Eric Jensen, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with people along the Bone Turnpike with the state police, with their family, and people with wedding forensics that are increasingly, when I was a kid and now when I was an adult, they have roles with him on all sides of my house planting evidences. And Eric Jensen with state police. Also a Mike Roberts, in other words. And their neighbors too. Increasingly, people from Central Connecticut State University has roles with these countries in the news and intercities with people next to the campuses with connections between them. And those connections were made by their roles with predicate acts together, timed intercities. Because this breaching method shows them how they need to hide lie progressions. All right, so Merry Christmas, people. Have a great, and Judge Napolitano, please do what's right. Get the Connecticut Interbranch and the Wethersfield Police on paper, one name and sequence, and get me off the fake conversations with them. The same thing with WFSB. And these are names next to Fox Connecticut News involved increasingly as people has something to do with their roles with the intelligence and systems associated with the spots and names next to Fox Connecticut News, including the Homeland Security, and they're changing it, how they changed the name from Department of Immigration's Naturalization Services. Increasingly involved with the Wethersfield founding locations too, and the Hartford founding locations used self-value tactical ulterior from how our founders, communicated for us to appreciate what was left entrenched and rolls with it, with what its actual value was and is. Peter Guy, Maxine, thank you.